All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming today. I know you all heard a lot of information. And it's one more layer to the cake. I'm Peter Mattingly, the Research Program Manager at the Governor's Office of Soil Recovery. So today we'll be talking about shoreline resiliency and what that means from our perspective with the various programs that we implemented after Sandy. So this is a very technical presentation, a lot of interactivity. So forgive me while I navigate through different things. And if there's any point you'd like to stop and pause, please let me know. Happy to look at something a little more closely if you'd like, because we do cover quite a bit of scope across the entire city. And scanning the country for people who show up early.
The last session ran long.
All right, budget back up. All right, so we can just take a deep dive. All right, so we all know the background here. October 2020, when Sandy hit the coast of New York State, we leave behind a massive path of destruction. And this unprecedented event revealed indisputable vulnerability and exposure to flood risk, with total storm damages exceeding $60 billion. We can see some of the aftermath here in this picture of Oakwood Beach, one of the more popular areas for the bio program example. And the disbursement of federal funding for recovery in New York State has been a massive undertaking. So the purpose of unifying efforts, our agency, the Governor's Office of Soil Recovery, was established and charged with planning, coordinating, and implementing recovery and climate adaptation programs across the entire state. So GOFR's work has been centered on that meaningful recovery must reflect the realities of climate change, which include increasing frequency of storms and sea level rise. And New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has stated that the frequency, intensity, and duration of extreme precipitation events and coastal storms and flooding are increasing. Exemplified by the pattern of extreme weather in recent years. And sea level rise is the most directly observable effect of climate change in the state. And even absent changes in storm frequency and intensity, sea level rise alone will result in an increase in coastal flooding. So in response to Sandy and in light of growing climate concerns, GOSA created a number of recovery and prevention programs which were implemented statewide. And our research went out to understand the effectiveness of these programs. So always the fun part, what's our objective? So we set out to aim demonstrate exactly that increased resiliency and reduce economic loss across university shorelines due to the combined effects specifically of the buyout and acquisition program and the single family housing recovery program. So the buyout and acquisition program aimed to convert the most vulnerable neighborhoods into uninhabitable buffer zones. So these are important to note. We ultimately did not do buyouts in this program, but I'll go into that a little bit more. We did, however, include 529 properties, approximately, that were in part of the acquisition component of these programs. These were the properties that were purchased by state and sold at auction to buyers who committed to redeveloping the structures with higher elevation standards. And as needed with the program, these structures were required to be elevated to 2 or more feet above the base flood elevation, or the BFE, which is the computed elevation to which a flood is anticipated to rise during a 100-year event. I realize a lot of text for now, just so that we're going to do some fun math stuff and just looking at the just hang tight with me for a little bit. And then next, so we can see an example here of an elevation here of a property that was taken to the BFE. Pretty exciting. Long beach to get one of his. All right. And so then within the single family housing recovery program, applicants receive funding to facilitate the builders on the construction of their homes. So this program provided additional mitigation measures, including elevations. So through the New York Rising Elevation Initiative, homeowners who reside within the 100-year floodplain receive the option to elevate their structure to the required 2 more feet above the BFE. So for applicants whose home is located within 100-year floodplain and sustained damage during the storm, elevation was mandatory. And then this approximately took up for 3,600 homes that were both optional and mandatory elevations, performed with individual shoulder repairs and new construction. So if you kind of see this before and after photo, this is not my parents' house, but we can kind of where initially the foundations started, and then after the BFE, the requirement of policy to the funds to be allocated, you can see that it's risen quite substantially. All right, so this is a lot of work across the state, these individual properties. How do we actually understand the effectiveness of this at a larger scale? So demonstrating our objective, we implemented data collected through these programs and simulated various flood scenarios on the coastal communities that participated in order to understand the impact of those funded recovery interventions. So, because I love methodology. Is everyone comfortable? I know we have a lot of
Need more chairs.
We need more chairs. Let's see. Let's try and find some chairs.
If the chair people in the back even forward, there should be people standing behind them. Stuff like that. 2-layer.
Need like 5 chairs.
I can love what they do with the chase there.
It's okay. We all feel a little bit more comfortable. All right, so the really fun part to help us understand exactly how we did what we did, what makes those wonderful maps that we're talking about. So this thing called HAZIS. And HAZIS is a geospatial software developed by FEMA. It actually to use to measure, to estimate risks from earthquakes, floods, tsunamis. And it's actually used for mitigation and recovery by planners, GIS specialists, and emergency managers to determine potential losses from disasters and to identify the most effective mitigation actions for minimizing those losses. So HAZIS is very effective. It can help us quantify and map risk. Information such as physical damage, economic loss, social impacts, and the cost effectiveness of common mitigation strategies. So the software runs 4 separate models that can be intertwined. We use the flood and hurricane model to estimate physical and economic damages to buildings from wind and wind-borne debris. And then we also combine this with our internal storm surge model, as well as user supply data to estimate the damage to buildings caused by coastal flooding, driven onshore by hurricane winds. So the HAZIS photo model calculates physical damage and economic loss to the coastal and over the vegetation, and the losses are calculated using functions that relate to the depth and type of flooding to the degree of damage for various categories of buildings. Now, for those out there ready to take up the computer or GIS software program, there's actually an open source version of HAZIS called FAST, the Flood Assessment Structure Tool. So FAST calculates building level flood impacts with user provided building and flood depth data. So FAST uses the HAZIS flood model methodology to assign depth damage functions to buildings according to their occupancy type, their first floor elevation, foundation type, and number of stories. So flood depth is then extracted at every building and used as a depth damage function parameter to calculate flood losses in dollars. So we ultimately use the software to run our analysis of flood damage in New York State. And in this, in conjunction, we also use something called the loss avoidance methodology. So this helps us understand, makes a comparison of 2 conditions of a building. So we use a flood depth grid that was created by our team to simulate Sandy's inundation level. And then we also created and built user-defined building characteristics. So with the flood depth grid and building characteristics, this methodology allows us to calculate the damages of each building. And we analyze the difference between the cost of damages prior to the elevation and the acquisitions, as well as after these resiliency measures were done. And this was done for Sandy and various 100 grids. All right. We see one map so far, so we're getting there. So getting more into the data, previously mentioned buyouts and were ultimately excluded from our study because essentially what the FAST tool does is calculating building damage costs, and our methodology relies on an actual structure, and essentially the buyout program leaves us with our structure. So the removal of structure, from this results in, future damage of any kind, no damage of any kind, because the area no longer contains the structure. So then our assumption is that now for buyout property, that the area would be a total loss avoidance in the context of the study. And it is worth noting out, however, by excluding buyout areas from our study, that loss avoidance estimates are actually fairly conservative. Our buyout program results in the creation of wetlands and green spaces, which should provide the surrounding areas with further protection that extends beyond the scope of the study. Calculating these specs is fairly complicated, but the benefit does exist and should be kept in mind when analyzing the cumulative impact of COSR programs. So of those people we actually did include, first map, here we go. Okay. So this is displaying all the applicants, the participating properties that were included in our study. So when we open up the legend here, what we can see here is in orange, elevated homes, and then purple, we have our acquisitions. So this is distributed across Long Island and Staten Island. All right. We can see the density just based on where the dots are clustering. And when you zoom in, you can see the mix everywhere. And when we click on one, we can see the characteristics of all the characteristics of this elevation or the acquisition. So for here, we have, for example, is that occupancy type, area in square feet, foundation type, number of stories. And right here, we see this pre-FFH. So pre-FFH is pre-first floor height, meaning that the height of the first floor in feet below or without the GOSR improvements. This is also followed by our post-FFH, which means with GOSR improvements. So the height was calculated based on our team in accordance with the PFE for each structure and location. So you can see here that before this height, this house was about 4.5 feet above ground. It needs to be about 8 feet above the ground after following the program. And so it's approximately raised about a little over 3 feet. And so that's continued for each property. So we can do that for some 3,600 individual properties. Individual cutoff. Position. You can see that. Okay. So, perfect. So overall, the combined value of the buildings, and again, when we say value, we're referring to specifically the structure only. We didn't include content as far as what's actually contained in the properties. Is estimated at approximately $679 million for single family properties and $109 million for acquisition properties. So bringing us a total of $869 million of building stock that are reflected in this project. So to go over it, of course, all the properties that were considered in the study reported significant damage after Sandy. And for a quick example, we can see in this map the extent of those damages here in the Turnville area of Staten Island, specifically when we look at the beach area. So this is prior to Sandy. And then when we look over specifically along the coast, you can see substantial beach erosion and loss of vegetation, which led to more severe flooding and damages and loss. And then, so the estimated damages for the single family properties was recorded in GOSR's intelligence database. And based on this internal data, we determined that there was a total of $130 million reported through these estimated cost of repairs for the single family housing program. And we can see that through this map. So you can see again that same legend. So all home elevated properties are going to be in orange, acquisitions are in purple. And then we can see estimated cost of repairs here. Zoom in. See the extent of it. And then looking at the estimated cost of repairs. So we can see quite a few large bubbles here. We're in the Long Beach area. Zoom out.
So who paid to elevate the buildings then, the houses?
So through our programs, we allocate the funds to distribute those.
So New York State tax dollars paid for it, or FEMA paid for it? Who paid?
Things, you know,
CDBG, I think.
it was a community development block grant.
Yeah, HUD, the federal dollars. I don't quote me on that, because there was like a bunch of funding that went into Sandy from a bunch of different sources, but I think this one was from HUD.
Perfect. So, talking more about the awards, we break down the allocation of the awards, specifically the amount spent towards elevation initiatives. So, complying with policy, the South Florida program, houses need to elevate to the BFE +2, meaning that they need to be elevated to the base flood elevation. So 2 extra feet in addition to the elevation required. So a total of $820 million was awarded overall to New York State, Shoreline Resiliency, 624 of which was allocated towards elevation alone. So you can see here the allocation of awards. So in this table, 86% of the total award for single families was spent on elevations. Single family properties on average were elevated above 9 feet, and acquisitions on average about 5 feet, with it costing about $19,000 to elevate a single family home by 1 foot and about $37,000 to elevate an acquisition by 1 foot. So together, this brings the total elevation for all properties to 36,000 feet, or about 7 miles of elevation added to buildings across New York State shoreline. So to evaluate the extent of these elevations as part of the goal, including adaptation and safeguarding people in their homes, the goals are for the research these interventions across the state, and then estimating the resiliency of the various storm simulations. So for our results, we're capturing a unique comparison that we call our damage comparison, where we compare 2 conditions of the buildings. So we simulate different storms and calculate estimated damages. One condition is where those who did not intervene, and the other is where those who did intervene. And the program had included the elevation initiative, and the buildings were repaired to the exact same condition that they were before, without improvements. That gives us a baseline if measures weren't implemented. So again, we can look at total damage loss, conditions, and then so the damage tables we can see help visualize exactly the extent of this. So on the left, we can see without goes or interventions, if no repairs have been made, if everything had been built the exact same, and on the right, with the implementation of the measures that we initiated, so all of the elevations and whatnot, the estimated building damage comes to 0 if another Sandy were to come along and to hit the exact same properties that were hit. So able to work with that and give us an idea about how effective under these simulations this program was for this context. But we live in a world where there are much more frequent storms, sea level rise approaching. So we wanted to go beyond that and extend our scope to understand holistically how far these initiatives could hold out. We break down the table. And then we can also visualize this too, because I know everyone wants maps. So we can see in the legend here, the dot size corresponds to the building loss. Zoom in here. Long Beach. And essentially with the implementation measures, we can see on the right after scrolling that all the dots essentially return to their origin size, indicating just their location. So again, this is the simulation for Sandy. So another Sandy rolls around that and hits these exact same properties, will report approximately 0 in loss. But turning to something a little bit more common, so the 100-year flood event. So 100-year flood event, a much more common storm, and we find our maximum loss avoidance at approximately $330 million. So with an average loss avoided of 74,000 and 139,000 for single family and acquisition properties. So we understand though that some of these estimates are somewhat limited. Our simulations don't include small repetitive storms with a shorter return period. And that more frequent storms, that damages could accumulate depending on the number of events. So overall, our estimates consider all the physical structure and again, content of the structure. And in terms of damages, and considering damages with respect to the current time frame, so they won't take into account inflation over time. But again, going to the 100-year event, you can see here that we do start to see a little bit more damage actually reported for the 100-year event. That's much more common, but still fairly comparable to without having implemented any of those, that we're able to actually save quite a bit and prevent a lot of damage that was reported in our scene.
Sandy larger than one.
Yeah.
So why don't we understand why this is showing damages for a smaller event than Sandy, like the cost of damage, whereas with the Sandy chart you're showing that there's 0 damages.
I think it was more holistic, that it covers the greater area. So not exactly, yeah, not all the buildings reported damage. I think it was beyond that.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm scared to tell you the wrong information, but from as given that like 100-year events are more common, and that the area of impact is going to be increasing, it makes sense that we want to look at them.
So you look at a wider area than with the Sandy event, you just look at the buildings that were
Impacted.
impacted by this.
Yeah, so like the 100-year flood event, I believe would be that, yeah, I can talk with you on that when I check, I double check. Yeah.
Do you want us to ask questions as you're going along, or should we?
Oh, that's really fine. You can stop me.
What do you mean by reported damages? What's the percentage of damages do you think that are not reported?
So
All right, stop 1 second. Think in terms of self-built homes, smaller bungalows, things that don't have mortgages on them. They may never get reported.
So these estimates are those who sought to gain for their insurance from FEMA, or who were allowed to apply for funding from the state after it, who wanted to apply for funding to basically rebuild or repair. So those who sought that were, we had to estimate exactly how much damage there was. Among those who didn't want to,
Or couldn't.
I don't have a number off the top of my head.
So you don't know what the percentage of reported really is in terms of the total amount of damages.
Of those who did report versus not wanting to report?
Just total damages and what percent in fact were not reported.
Not reported, wouldn't have an idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, just to clarify, so what you're reporting on, if you're reporting on the buildings and homeowners that participated in this program,
Correct.
whether and what percentage or not, how fair or unfair, that's not the scope of his presentation.
Right.
He didn't determine who qualified.
No.
This presentation is just reporting on the properties that did qualify, the measures that were put into the percentage that was put into it, the general types, and what the results were, right?
Right,
Okay,
so
just clarify.
just the data guy.
To make the point that the total amount of damages that we're looking at, no relationship to the actual fact of the amount of damages and economic distress that in fact people might have suffered.
So we're using, in the context of this study, figuring out of those that we actually have tangible evidence for. Yeah, that we can actually say, based on this, giving us a baseline to actually work with and compare over time. So, if we're able to, I think, understand that better about, who doesn't report and how we can better appreciate that holistically too. We'll definitely be interested in that.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if you want me to say anything about that.
Sure.
Okay, sorry, actually, I should say, I'm Peter's colleague at the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. I'm the Assistant Director for Research and Data and GIS. But I want to acknowledge what you just said, because we know that there's a ton of information, like there's a ton of people that don't qualify for federal aid. That was a huge issue, and like we found, I think it was the state set up after Ida, a specific fund for undocumented New Yorkers that they could access. Nobody pulled that funding, and because of a multitude of reasons, but it is a known issue. The other thing is that it shows hands. Has anyone in here dealt with FEMA data? How hard was it? How easy was it to get?
Was the worst.
I keep the data very locked in my closet. I'm just kidding.
I've dealt with data for a long time, and there are a lot of different places that it's hard to get data.
Yeah,
So it's not just a FEMA thing, and it's not just a governmental thing.
yeah,
I've had problems with getting private sector data. I've had problems getting not-for-profit. So some systems have good data sharing. It's easy, others don't.
yeah. So to go on what your question was, like, we 100% know, and that's something that the state definitely needs to put more attention into. And that's something that I know when I go to conferences like this, it's like we want to talk with people about how do we get additional information about, so that we can like properly quantify the amount of damage that was or the amount of damage that happened, but also the amount of economic impact that was felt.
One thing I do want to say is that the state and the city is one of the best at trying to make that data available. And I really appreciate it. It makes it so that we can do research and things that we can't do anywhere else. I do want to say it's fantastic. I wish everybody else would do the same thing, but it's what it is, what it is.
Well, I'm in charge of data requests, so if
Thank you, thank you.
you have a question, we can go over that.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Yeah, and definitely if you're really interested in working on a research project, we're going to just email us. We're always interested in seeing what you like to do. And then seeing what you could build off. So whether you're already a homeowner, a new homeowner, thinking about becoming a homeowner, or renter for life, you might more realities you might face over the course of your mortgage, considering how your home is a viable, realistic part of your family's generational wealth. So, however, according to one of our reports that came out from the First Street Foundation, the risk of flooding facing New York homeowners today, the physical risk, the financial cost of recoveries will increase with flooding becoming more pervasive and commonplace, and to some extent more intense.
So I have a question. With that data, did they include the data after your build up, your elevating of the houses, or did they base the data on the ground level of where the building was done?
When they
Because that was, yeah,
these estimates,
yeah, because that is actually an important, if are they building, what floods, is where you park the car, or is it after you elevated that structure?
flood estimations, like I would say even in general, depending on the time frame, to take with a grain of salt almost, just because I think like we even saw with Ida that there maybe there's spots where vulnerability, we don't track. And I think with this report, this was just sort of more of a reference that we had used, in a sense, giving us a perspective to include. So we didn't use their data, the first read. We just acknowledged that they reported in general, homeowners are going to face scalable rise on a more common basis. But it's a great point, especially too when you're thinking about using FEMA data, when exactly the last updates were made, and then if there's a much more granular level they can use, like with New York, you can use nuisance flooding from the risk map that they have. That'll give you a little bit more clearer picture, potentially. Yeah, that's a great point. All right. So for the majority of this research, we focus on the 100-year floodplain, initially anticipating that the 500-year floodplain as well. That's an area with a 0.2% chance of vast inundation from an extreme weather event in a given year. And so the idea of the concept of a 500-year cover might be misleading in terms of frequency if we consider projections of rising sea levels. So we have other reports of projecting flooding as well. So this one here with New York City planning, anticipating that by 2050, the intensity of a 500-year floodplain will essentially become the new 100-year floodplain in terms of frequency due to sea level rising. Oh, it's only 3 o'clock. Okay, we're gonna go. Without considering sea level rise, simulations would fail to capture the changing landscape of the New York State shoreline. So where over the course of the next few decades, new backyards will be exposed to extreme weather events, and more properties will increase vulnerability to the risk and cost of such events. So to simulate the 100-year floodplain with more realistic estimated damages, we incorporate sea level rise projections from the Department of Environmental Conservation. So by 2050, we can start to see for both New York City and along the Long Island region, projections ranging from 8 to about 2.5 feet of sea level rise, which coupled with an extreme weather event will increase the likelihood of damages. So demonstrating this, we can see this interactive. It's going to move very slow. So,
What are you showing? What geographic area?
so this is Long Beach, or on Long Island.
Okay.
It's that little part that we have zoomed into. So this map shows the sea level rise projected in normal by NOAA. And as we scroll down, we can simulate sea level rise as a result of inundation footprint. So overlaid with the locations of the GOSR acquisitions and elevations. And here we go. So just picturing it for a minute, you're in Long Beach, you get to the keys, your beachfront property, fresh air, taking you in, morning coffee. And you think to yourself, by 2052, quick 30 years, I'll pay off this home and really get my vibe. Then though, as you scroll, you can start to see this is what projections look like for 1 feet of sea level inundation, low to medium projection for the 2050s. And then as we continue to scroll, looking specifically at how it starts to change, we can start to see a little bit greater inundation. So it's a little bit more visible, but we can see some more blue in these areas. And then if we scroll to 6 feet, which is a very high projection, we do see considerable inundation of sea level rise.
Is that high tide inundation or permanent?
I think it's sea level. Just
It's really what we.
This is based off of high tide.
yeah,
So I just want to inject a little bit of hope in here. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Climate Central, right? And the information they provide. So it doesn't have to be that way if we can bend the curve on our greenhouse gas emissions. So I just want to know. If we're at 1.1 and the target maximum is 1.5 for the Paris Climate Agreement. So if we can bend that curve, it doesn't have to be in that worst case scenario.
yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, going off, yeah, the state's gonna recognize those the areas with increasing vulnerability as this, sea level rise, that effect is starting to be internalized and manifest. That implementations will be required, however large scale. Granted, the obvious solution, of course, but yeah, I think it'll be slow moving, but we have, a greater sense of that urgency, I think, from Sandy, and 10 years later, we're still seeing.
I don't want to, sorry, I don't want to detract from your very good, excellent presentation. Looking at the feasibility or the mitigation that you're using, but I'm wondering to what extent, rather than just looking to elevate buildings to be able to get away from the rising sea level. Ultimately, with erosion that is going to accelerate, and potential scoring and so on that's going to happen, these buildings will be destabilized. Anyway, I'm looking at the possibility of an eco-engineering based approach. I know that's not the focus of your work, I know that, but if we look at an eco-engineering work where we plant natural vegetation, I am from the tropics, so I know about mangroves, which are very, very effective at shoreline stabilization. I'm not sure what sort of vegetation in the temperate parts of the world like here, but to me, that would be the city should consider stabilizing the shoreline and coupled with other types of mitigation methods doing rather than just raising the buildings. That's just something that I want to show you.
Yeah, it's definitely a point. So there were, I think the idea that sort of captivates that is the buyouts program, which saw that people could no longer live in those areas because they were they were extremely vulnerable, and that converting those over to those like buffer zones or green zones, allowing them to actually serve as like a flood mitigation tool. With elevations, that the ability, for people who wanted to stay and participate in programs who were within that 100-year floodplain, trying to think that they didn't see that that perspective, that it would be potential that continue to erode, depending on the topography of where they exactly are. But yeah, I was at their point, and definitely things beyond, the individual property, the surrounding region, how it could actually protect a greater community and not just the property.
Yeah, flying into Jeff Station a few days ago, from the Atlantic side, you can clearly see the vulnerability. Of the area within a matter of years. You're not going to see much land there. I'm sorry. In my humble opinion, I studied marine science. I don't think I'm going to see much. You're going to see much. I hope I can fill out, but
Well, with the, as you said, with elevations, they are very expensive. Like the state's not doing that for IDA. We're not funding elevation. So, that's also in Westchester and Napa, but I think kind of building on what you're saying is that the state is kind of changing its approaches.
Combination of strategies. But I know in the Caribbean, we are looking towards eco-engineering based approach. And I think when they evaluated the tsunami and some of the areas that were strongly affected in comparison to the areas that had, at least strong vegetation, indigenous vegetation, or those models of development that incorporated vegetation within the actual design, they were able to withstand very strong, tsunamis. So I was just thinking that is.
Yeah, and then as a side note too, it's sort of become can be very controversial depending on the area that can actually fund those and implement them. Whereas I think areas with a little bit more equity that have the resources and tools to fund those measures, mitigating like beach erosion and whatnot, who actually is, gets those measures and who can't access those still. So yeah, that idea of equity is very few people in the states with those measures.
I just want to make the point that it's too late a little bit. in order to go back to what our nature, natural, environment is going to be, and we just need to come up with better structures in order to fight this problem.
Yeah.
That's
your buffer.
Yeah.
That's your buffer, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a little too late. And well, this is also, like, we can, actually, I was hoping you would actually think something. But, please go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, Highland Park wasn't developed 100 years ago, right? So what this is all about is defending a decision that was made 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't build a community in Lawrence Marsh now or North Greens Edge.
Want to make it better?
Nor should we, because it'll be putting people in danger.
And also just a point about some of the nature-based solutions, the effective measures, sometimes the communities don't want it because it interferes with their view of the beach or the ocean. So that's another complicating factor.
Yeah, I mean, truly the point about, where we build now is so much more different because we're actually, I think we do take that into extent, how building, I mean, a lot of these buildings too have been there for decades, not thinking about how resilient they would be to, a storm like Sandy or a much more common, something like Ida that really took effect, and that, building repairs, how much we actually invest in infrastructure too, not meeting that as well. So yeah, again, sort of the scope of the study being able to say that at least with the measures that were implemented, controlling for the exact losses that we had experienced, that we're able to say, at least with this scenario, here's how much we can actually mitigate and avoid for next time. But there will be new houses and additional repairs will be need for older homes too. Thankfully, the idea that you shouldn't build on particular vulnerable areas is really resonating, much with everyone in that party, not wanting to invest in areas to only use it. But yeah, I think over time we'll start to realize where, constantly realizing where we should not have built those decisions made, or even less years ago.
This whole conversation really is developing into how we can focus on removal and moving out from vulnerable areas that should not be lived in, that will be eventually over flooded no matter how much money we put into it. And it really boils down, doesn't it? There's sufficient funds for public education starting from kindergarten up so that the public really understands what the basic problems are. I have been through various communities. I remember going over through Greasy when I was working over there after Sandy, and their whole focus was build it back the way it was. People should not be living in Greasy, but that's the way it is. I was down at Naples, South Florida, and I walked around the streets with some friends where it was totally devastated, just like Greasy. And their whole point was, oh, we're going to build it back. We'll do it stronger, but we're going to build it back. There's no way in hell that they can build it strong enough to count for the next 100 years. And I really think that the government should be focusing on public education so that people get a basic understanding of the environment and the problems that we have.
Yeah, definitely. I think education, people starting to realize this. I actually started my project Green Club in high school. That it is really, important that people not have to experience a disaster to appreciate the fact that, these things are more reoccurring, the damage extend beyond, they're just their neighborhood affects, many vulnerable people. And
and the whole reason why those guys moved out of Staten Island was because they got flooded multiple times. And they realized enough is enough.
right. And
That's ridiculous.
The big case of like Oakwood Beach, very much, participatory, the community definitely saw that, and, you know, they were one of the highest participants in the bio program in Oakwood Beach. I think that's why I think they were able to appreciate that. It, you know, it's unfortunate that it took that, you know, Irene, Lee, and Sandy to eventually motivate them to relocate. But then again, yeah, the idea of being able to actually relocate having been destroyed, because much of the incentive too is to rebuild with insurance and with you know, a program that buyouts becoming a lot more commonplace, and with additional, you know, incentives, as you saw like with Harvey in Houston, that people are thinking smarter about how to actually fund or get people relocated that doesn't further burden them, that allows them to actually relocate in a way that hasn't been ever done on such a large scale. Again, you know, it's voluntary depending on the area, at least it wasn't the case in New York. So very much contextual, but yeah, at least it's, I think people are given that option now more and more commonplace.
Regarding buyouts, in one of your slides, you indicated the elevation in along with buyouts, but I thought buyouts was literally you buy the building and it gets torn down.
Right, so buyouts weren't included, and in this study, we didn't include buyouts, because buyouts is literally just the removal of the structure. And
So
so
what are the purple dots then?
those are single family homes that were participating either optional or mandatory elevation.
Okay,
Yeah, they didn't participate in the buyout program.
so it's just elevation.
These are all the properties that stayed, that weren't destroyed, or acquisition that were sold to auctioneers who promised to rebuild the FD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
because yeah, for us to be able to actually say we avoided this much damage, we had to take into account that the building had to still be there and to upgrade it to some degree.
I think that if this is on, if this is a public information, it's good to make it clear that acquisitions is not by it.
Yes, acquisitions are not buyouts.
But I mean, the communication on this.
Oh, sure. So, well, just slide down to the really. Oh, hang on, I think there's one more. Oh, no.
But it doesn't have to be this way.
Forever positive feedback loops.
This
Say
again,
what level of greenhouse gas you're talking about?
I feel like that's a whole new level
Yeah.
of complication. Yeah, that's like I don't think we looked at it.
well, so I mean, yeah, we didn't correlate sea level rise with greenhouse, the emissions rate increase. So we kind of defer to whatever the actual effect of it would be.
Well, NOAA has a whole series of graphs that speak right to that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, good things to know for future research.
Yeah.
See, you know, we're almost done here, and the real conversation also should be whether or not flood insurance provides a wrong incentive for people to rebuild.
No, it does. So yeah, the insurance, then back to that conversation, yeah, people are going to incentivize to rebuild, makes no sense. If people are allowed to relocate, that makes more sense, or yeah, rebuild. So here we can see with or without coastal interventions, what we can see estimated building damage. So with the interventions, we do see considerable decrease in how much reported damage there are after the various mitigation scenarios that we do. So along here, we have the 100-year events, then +1 feet, 2 feet of sea level rise, all the way up to 6 feet. So we're able to say, at least for the properties that were included in the scope of the study, that if you look with this scenario, that this is reported building damage after all the interventions that were implemented, specifically the rising initiative. And We can see loss avoidance here specifically, so what you're actually able to avoid in damages. And then, of course, I think the biggest avoided loss with the 100-year events, and then followed by 100 event plus sea level rise. You can see this in this table here, a little bit articulated in overall, while FEMA did require some homes to be able to after Sandy, New York State recognized that need to go above and beyond what was required. So taking climate change into account, we were able to exceed that baseline that FEMA required to elevate a significant number of homes impacted by Sandy. And that overall the intervention made by Gozer proved to be effective for a bridge timeline between 30 and 50 years. So that 100-year event plus 2 years sea level rise. Interventions made you appreciate the long-term impacts of climate change from the start as powerful as Sandy to one more commonplace like Ida. And from this research, we understand there are gaps, but I think we're able to start off with a baseline appreciating the longer-term projections of sea level rise affecting these areas, and then to also recognizing what programs and initiatives might work best for different locations across the state. Thank you. No more questions. We're done. Any more questions?
Question about methodology, just specifically about the, where you were able to get the building characteristics data from? Did you just get that from your record?
So that's all from reported to us.
Oh, okay.
And
So
those
that's part of the
assessments,
program.
yeah, and assessments made of those damages that we have to understand exactly all the property characteristics for each structure.
I'm curious if you ran a scenario where that money was used for buyouts instead of the interventions you described,
So
and what the damage avoidance benefit is.
yeah, it's on our radar. So specifically looking at like what consequences is for a buy area, trying to think about how to implement that. I think we have to do a little bit more investigating. You require more like departmental coordination to actually measure and understand exactly how beneficial this green space will actually hold up to a particular events. Whereas like with the building laws, we can understand that a little bit more straightforward.
Seems like for planning ahead. Excellent. And analysis like that at the point of policy.
Or just the price of the equipment, and then also included money allocated for restoration of woods and areas on the structures.
So the buyout property, the money given to the homeowners is their pre-sold value of property. And I think after that.
We gotta wrap up for the next session, so maybe like 2 minutes.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's from the state. So we're actually demolishes the property. Yeah, the state takes over to demolish the property.
And then who manages the land for restoration after?
So technically, because there are still holdouts of people who opt not to buy in, the areas still can have people living in the next space, and it's still municipal services there by that. So it's very nice. People.
Usually there's a nonprofit that I think that would partner, like we find people to hold the buyout. So the state, I think the state holds it. And then in the local jurisdiction. I would use the top part of that.